Greetings, friends. It's me, Wayman29. Welcome to another series on Hell, Views of the Underworld in Literature, and we're in the Mesopotamian section of these lectures. This will be lecture 1.7. In the last lecture, we discussed the descent of Ishtar, kind of looked at her role in the underworld and what the Babylonian and Sumerian view of the underworld was. Previously, before that, we looked at some visions and dreams. A dream of Enkidu. If you remember, you can kind of go back and look at some of those earlier lectures. Now I want to discuss two more pieces of literature, and then we'll kind of move out of the Sumerian Babylonian era and get into the Egyptian underworld, which is pretty much in line. It's just a little bit different, but we'll see some different judges down there, and we'll see some different gates and different processes that things move through the underworld. Now we're going to look at two heroes that travel to the underworld in Babylonian Sumerian culture. This would be Nergal, and in the next lecture, which we'll be getting to in a later video, will be Izdubar. We're going to be looking at the account of, or the text of, Nergal and Ereshkigal. Nergal can be seen as a biblical, not a biblical, but a Sumerian hero, Babylonian hero, kind of paired with Hercules. He's kind of hero, maybe along the line of Achilles, and even in some aspects out of the Hebrew, Samson. Nergal is associated also with, he's seen as a war deity. He ends up becoming the king of the underworld, but he's paired off with ERRA, which we discussed in our last video. And if you take him and you compare him to the Hebrew Samson, Samson was a hero who plagued. He plagued the Philistines. He used fire and war and many different things on the enemy. That's exactly what ERRA does. He puts plagues, and so he's associated with Nergal here. And here it's pretty interesting. We're going to be looking at the text. This is from Stephanie Daly's text, Myths from Mesopotamia, Creation, the Flood, Gilgamesh, and Others. I'll be posting an English translation to this so that you can follow along. I like Stephanie Daly's translation because she has a lot of notes and she picks up on a lot of nuances that the general reader would not be able to point out. So it's interesting here because if you look over the text of Nergal and Ereshkigal, it starts out where Anu made his voice heard and spoke, and he addressed the words to Kaka. Now, Kaka is the visor of the heavens, because here in Sumerian and Babylonian literature, the head deities cannot go down to the underworld. The deities from the underworld cannot come up. They have to send their messengers or visors. So he sends Kaka down to Kernunji, which is another name for the underworld, and to speak to Ereshkigal. And he says, look, we know it's impossible for you to come up, and it's impossible for us to go down, but we have something for you, and we want to give a present to you. So Kaka, he goes down a long stairway. He passes through the gates. He doesn't have to give anything up, as we've seen in the other literature. And he goes through all 7 gates without a problem, without being asked for anything, as we've seen in the descent of Ishtar. And he goes into the courtyard. He kneels in the ground in front of Ereshkigal, and he says, hey, I'm sent down here. You have a present in heaven waiting for you. So Ereshkigal, she can't go up, so she sends her messenger. I believe the messenger that goes up to get it is Namtar. Yes, Namtar is Ereshkigal's visor. And she says, O Namtar, my visor, I shall send you to the heaven of our father Anu. Namtar, go up the long stairway of heaven. Take from the table and accept a present for me. Whatever Anu gives to you, you must present to me. So he says, okay. He goes up, and all the gods respectfully kneel. The text is a little bit broken up, and we don't really understand what totally is going on here, but we see in ancient Near Eastern literature that great respect is paid to messengers when they come in. And in Canaanite literature, as we'll get to after the Egyptian section, you'll see where Baal slights a messenger from both the sea and from death, the underworld, and he is punished for it. So here, Nergal doesn't bow before the messenger, so the messenger gives him a second chance. He's kind of winking at the guy. Here it says, the gods who dwell with Ereshkigal, why do you not kneel down before him? I keep winking at you, but you pretend not to realize. So he's like, look, you have to bow down. It's disgraceful not to. And I keep trying to throw you a hint what you're supposed to do, but you refuse to do it. So Nergal says, you know, it's a disgrace. Some scholars believe he needs to be punished. So Nergal says, well, I'll go to the underworld. Then he's one of the deities. He says to Nergal, if you want to go on the journey, take a sword. And he has Nergal cut down these trees and makes a wooden throne. This is a symbol, maybe to be a way to escape the underworld in case he gets stuck down there. So he paints it up. You can read the text, and the chair is complete. And then gives him some instructions. He's like, look, when you go to the underworld, don't eat the bread, don't eat the meat, don't drink the beer, don't let them wash your feet, and when they give you clothes, don't wear the clothes, and when Ereshkigal goes to take her bath, don't do what men do. So don't sleep with her. So he descends. There's about 12 lines missing here. So he descends to the dark house, the dwelling of Ereshkigal's God, to the house which those who enter cannot leave, on the road where traveling is only one way, to the house where those who enter are deprived of light, where dust is their food, clay is their bread. They are clothed like birds in feathers. They see no light. They dwell in darkness. So we can see this part of the text used over and over again through the literature that we looked at. The gatekeeper, of course, Nergal's going to be there, opened his mouth and addressed his words to Nergal. I must take back a report to the god standing at the door. The gatekeeper entered and addressed the words to Ereshkigal, my lady. Some parts of this are missing in the cuneiform. Has come to see us, who will identify him. Ereshkigal made her voice heard and spoke to Namtar. Let me identify him. Let me him at the outer gate. Let me bring back to my lord a description of him. Namtar went and looked, and he says it's ERRA. Now this is interesting because here in the text, until this point, he is identified as Nergal. Now he's identified as ERRA. And this relates to Hebrew literature on the use of Elohim and Yahweh being interchanged at times for the name of the deities. And so it's shown here in this piece of literature. It's not prevalent all that much in ancient Near Eastern literature. From what I know and from what I've seen, there could be more, but this is one of the few texts that it happens in. So it did happen. But I'm not sure exactly how much it happened. So Namtar recognizes Nergal, and he says, hey, when I was in heaven, all the gods were kneeling and humbled before him, And all the gods of the land were kneeling and humbled before him. The gods rose to their feet in my presence. Now they have gone down to Karnunji. So here, ERRA is seen as multiple deities. Now they have gone down to Karnunji. Ereshkigal made her voice heard and spoke. She addressed the words to Namtar. My dear Namtar, you should not seek endly power, nor should you desire to do heroic deeds. What? Come up and sit on the throne of the royal dais? You perform the judgments of the broad earth. Should I go up to heaven, to the heaven of Anu, my father? Should I eat the bread of the Anunnaki? Should I drink the water of the Anunnaki? Go and bring the god into my presence. Namtar went and let in the gods, ERRA. So this is interesting. If you look at the word Elohim, plural, ERRA is now seen as a group of gods. Let Nergal through the first gate. So he's let through the gates with nothing being required of him. And he knelt down and kissed the ground in front of her. He straightened up and stood and addressed her. Anu, your father sent me to see you, saying, sit down on that throne, judge the cases of the great gods who live within Akala. As soon as they brought him a throne, he said to himself, don't do it. So now he's telling himself, he's remembering what says to him. I believe it was in the beginning. Yes. He doesn't sit. He doesn't eat the bread. He didn't eat the meat. He says to himself, don't drink the beer. Don't wash your feet. And when she went to bath and dressed herself in a fine dress and allowed him to catch a glimpse of her body, he resisted his heart's desire to do what men and women do. For the time being, we have 10 lines missing here. Nergal, she went to the bath and dressed herself in a fine dress and allowed him to catch a glimpse of her body. He gave in to his heart's desire to do what men and women do. The two embraced each other and they went passionately to bed. Now, they sleep with one another for 6 days. On the 7th day, he sneaks out and goes back up into the heavens. Now, why only 6 days? 7 days would have meant that he would have been trapped there. So he goes back up. Ereshkigal doesn't find him. He sneaks out. She says, where'd he go? She gets Namtar. She says, go up into the heavens and see if you can identify the god who was down here and bring him back. So this is pretty interesting. She knows who the god is, but she sends Namtar back up into the heavens of Anu to identify the god. So all the gods greet Namtar when he gets up there, and there's one deity who looks kind of suspicious. You can't look Namtar in the eye, and so he goes back down the underworld and he says to Ereshkigal, I couldn't find the god. There's nowheres around. However, one looked kind of suspicious. And Ereshkigal says, go grab that god. So she went up and grabbed him. So Nergal, he comes down, and he ends up, Nergal went down the long stairway of heaven. When he arrived at the gate of Ereshkigal, he said, gatekeeper, open the gate for me. He struck down the doorman of the first gate and did not let him grapple with him. He strikes down all the doors. So he puts an assault on the underworld. He entered into her courtyard and went up to her and laughed. He seized her hairdo and pulled her from the throne, and he seized her by her tresses. The two embraced one another. They went passionately to bed. And so Nergal ends up residing in the underworld, and from that point on, he ends up being the king of the underworld. This can be kind of like the idea of Hades and Persephone in some ways. So it's pretty interesting how Ereshkigal, there's been essays written on why she gave up her position. She was lonely. This isn't male domination necessarily. Some view that because she went for emotions, kind of like you see in the Aeneid, she forgot her mission, and she would rather have somebody run the place for her. But at any rate, the hero took over the underworld, and now he is the judge. So in our next lecture, we're going to look at Ishtar and Izdubar. And if you get a chance to read these beautiful texts on your own and make some comparisons, by all means do so. And feel free to put them in the comments. Also, I wanted to put in a user who's doing some really great work. He has some really great hypothesis on ancient Hebrew and how to understand that better. His channel is ancienthebrew.org, so go over there and check some of that out. It may be helpful to you, and some of those theories and hypotheses he has are brilliant, and so just take a look at them and see what you think. And it all ties in to this whole underworld idea in some way. Especially take a look at his video on Elohim. And also, one of my favorite professors, Backyard Professor, take a look at what he has to say about the gods. I have it favored. And also, Damiel 23 is doing his Flat Earth series. So this is just a plug for some people who are kind of interested in the same thing I am. So see you in the next lecture, and take care, be well, and remember, if everyone's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking.